Have you ever tucked into your favorite tub of vanilla, or maybe that family-sized block you keep for emergencies, and thought, this doesn't actually taste like cream? It tastes, well, just cold. And a bit, I don't know, foamy? Maybe you left a bowl out on the side during the last heatwave and noticed it didn't so much melt as just deflate into a kind of weird, glistening foam. If that sounds familiar, I've got some bad news for you. There is a very strong chance that the thing sitting in your freezer right now, the thing you happily serve to your kids or spoon straight from the tub after a bad day, it isn't legally allowed to call itself ice cream in the UK. I'm not joking. Go on, check the label while I wait. Look for the actual product descriptor. In this country, the word ice cream is legally protected. It means the manufacturer has to follow actual rules about what's inside. If they can't meet those standards, which usually means they've scrimped on the actual cream, they have to call it something else. Look for the tiny print that says frozen dessert, or, my personal favorite for pure, unadulterated marketing cheek, non-dairy ice cream alternative. These products look like ice cream. They're sold in the same aisle, priced similarly, and carry the same massive, trusted brand names you've known for decades. But legally, they're an imitation. They are essentially fake. In this video, we are blowing the lid off the freezer aisle. You will learn the exact psychological and chemical tricks the industry uses to convince you that cheap industrial foam is a luxury dairy product. I'm going to show you how to spot the fakes in exactly 2 seconds, without even opening the tub. We're going to name and shame some of Britain's most iconic, trusted brands that are, quite frankly, ripping you off with chemistry rather than cream. I'll break down lab data, expert opinions, and explain precisely what terms like overrun and hydrocolloids actually mean for your wallet, your gut, and your Sunday afternoon dessert. But I'm not just going to leave you depressed about your pudding. By the end, I'm going to give you a definitive buy list. 5 genuine, verifiably real ice creams you can actually find in British supermarkets like Tesco, Sainsbury's, and Waitrose, covering every budget from midweek treat to seriously posh. Stick around, because the trick used by the single biggest, most ubiquitous brand in the entire country is so audacious, so shockingly cheap, that I've saved it until almost the very end. You will never, ever look at a cornetto the same way again. Before we get to the brands, we need a quick lesson in how real ice cream actually works, versus the industrial sludge that dominates our supermarket shelves. At its simplest, classic genuine ice cream is basically an emulsion. You take cream, milk, sugar, and, traditionally, egg yolks, which act as a natural emulsifier. When you freeze it, you have to do it while stirring, a process called churning. This incorporates small amounts of air and keeps the ice crystals tiny, creating a rich, smooth, dense texture that melts luxurious and clean on your tongue. Think of a high-end vintage car. It's built of solid metal, heavy, built to last, and expensive to make, but the ride is unmistakable. Now let's look at the average budget or mid-range tub you find in Morrison's or Asda. Real cream is the single most expensive ingredient in ice cream. If you are a massive corporation owned by a private equity firm and your primary goal is to squeeze every last penny of profit out of every single plastic tub, real cream is the first thing you want to cut. But if you remove the cream and use mostly water or cheap milk instead, you're not making ice cream. You're making ice. It'll be hard, gritty, and frankly, rubbish. So, how do they fix it? They turn to food science, which is essentially just industrial magic dust for the bottom line. First, they replace the cream with cheap, processed fats, usually vegetable oils like palm or coconut oil. These are pennies to buy compared to dairy. Then they replace the cane sugar with cheaper, sweeter syrups. But wait, we now have a physical problem. These cheap fats, water, and syrups don't emulsify nicely like cream and eggs. They want to separate. The mixture won't hold air. The result would be a terrible, oily, icy disaster that consumers would reject immediately. This is where the real trickery comes in. To force this cheap mixture of oil and water to behave like dairy, they throw in a cocktail of hydrocolloids. That's just the fancy scientific word for gums and stabilizers. You'll see them on the label: gar gum, carob bean gum, also called locust bean gum, xanthan gum, cellulose gum, and carrageenan. Think of these gums like chemical scaffolding. They don't add flavor, they don't add nutrition. Their only job is to stabilize the structure, prevent massive ice crystals from forming, hold the mixture together, and create a sort of chewy, gummy texture that cleverly mimics the richness of actual butterfat. It's like taking that same high-end vintage car, but instead of solid metal. You build the body panels out of spray foam insulation, cover it in 1 centimeter of Bondo and paint, and then tune the suspension to bounce over the bumps rather than absorb them. To a distant observer, it might look the same. It might even drive okay for a mile. But the moment you actually look closely, or God forbid, try to repair it, you realize it's an engineered imitation designed to look good and be cheap, with zero of the substance of the original. This cocktail of gums doesn't just cheat you on ingredients. It actually affects the physics of the product in a way that, frankly, is a bit gross. Real, rich ice cream, made of dairy and eggs, melts very cleanly because dairy fat melts at body temperature. When you eat it, it coats your tongue in flavor and then disappears, leaving a clean, milky finish. Heavily stabilized products, however, don't melt cleanly. The chemical scaffolding, those gums, hold the structure together even as the fat warms up. This is why, when you do that heatwave melt test, the heavily stabilized ones don't turn into a puddle of cream. They slump. They turn into a weird, foamy, slightly spongy substance that retains the shape of the original scoop long after real ice cream would be liquid. It's also why some ice creams leave a weird, film-like, slimy coating in your mouth that persists long after you've finished the bowl. That's not richness you're feeling. That's the gar gum and carrageenan cocktail doing the heavy lifting that actual butterfat should be doing. And the single biggest secret, the most profitable trick of all, is one you can't even see. It's called overrun. This is simply the amount of air they whip into the product. Every ice cream needs some air. Otherwise, you'd be eating a brick of solid milk fat. But premium ice creams operate at low overrun, maybe incorporating 20% to 30% air. Budget products, especially those that rely heavily on gums to hold a weak structure together, can incorporate up to 100%. They are quite literally selling you a carton that is half-empty space, propped up by chemistry, and they charge you full price for it because you buy by the volume of the tub, not the weight of what's inside. These are products that aren't just cheap. They are deliberately engineered to minimize the value they give you. You think you're buying dessert. You're actually buying engineered air. Let's look at who's doing it to you. Let's pull back the curtain on the actual brands lining the shelves of your local supermarket. We'll start with the economy store brands and work our way up to the household institutions that have quietly broken your trust. First up, look at the bottom shelf at Asda or Morrison's. You'll find those massive 2-liter blocks of soft scoop vanilla flavor. They cost pennies, usually under £2 for a tub large enough to use as a doorstep. How does a supermarket like Asda offer that volume for that price? Simple. They aren't selling you dairy, they are selling you a chemistry experiment. The Independent Consumer Group, which analyzed budget supermarket lines and confirmed that these economy blocks rely on what the trade calls reconstituted skimmed milk concentrate and water as their base. Cream doesn't even make a guest appearance. Instead, they use cheap coconut oil to mimic the fat profile and pump the mixture with glucose syrup. Turn the tub over and read the ingredients. Water, glucose syrup, coconut fat, whey powder, emulsifiers, and a structural skeleton of gar gum and carob bean gum. When you eat it, it feels shockingly light, almost wet, and vanishes on your tongue like cold foam. It's cheap, yes, but at roughly 10 pence per serving, you are paying for frozen water and whipped tropical oil. A senior food scientist at the British Food Foundation noted that while these formulations meet legal safety guidelines, calling them traditional ice cream stretches the imagination, as the structure is entirely synthetic. It's an engineered illusion designed to fill a bowl for as little capital as possible. wdfoxfamayoksua.kuo Yesho. 1. If you think stepping up to a major national brand saves you from this, let's talk about Kelly's of Cornwall. This is a brand that trades heavily on its regional heritage. The packaging is covered in images of rolling pastures, whispering promises of traditional, rich clotted cream. Consumers buy it because they trust that Cornish means authentic dairy craft. But if you dig into the actual production reality under its parent company, Froneri, the global joint venture between Nestlé and private equity giants, the picture shifts. While Kelly's does use local clotted cream, that premium dairy is stretched to its absolute physical limit. To keep profit margins high at the massive scale required by supermarket contracts with Tesco and Sainsbury's, the recipe utilizes a heavy load of stabilizers. Real, high-fat clotted cream should give a clean melt, but consumer reviews frequently complain that Kelly's can feel surprisingly heavy and leave a strange, almost velvety film on the roof of your mouth. At over £4 a tub, you're paying a premium for that Cornish clotted cream marketing, but the underlying industrial process relies on emulsifiers like mono and diglycerides of fatty acids to stretch the expensive ingredients. The verdict is clear. It's an industrial product wearing a hand-churned rustic coat. www.tesco.com, Misho 1. If your cupboard or freezer is already making you sweat, hit that subscribe button right now. We are just getting started, and the deceptive practices get significantly more brazen from here. Let's move to the ultimate freezer staple, Wall's Soft Scoop. This blue tub is arguably the most recognized ice cream container in British history. It's the default choice for birthday parties, family barbecues, and Sunday night crumbles. Wall's is owned by Unilever, a multinational consumer goods titan. People buy Wall's because it's familiar. It's what their parents bought. But let's look at the cold hard data on the back of that iconic blue tub. It isn't legally called vanilla ice cream. The label strictly reads vanilla flavor ice cream dessert. Why the extra words? Because Unilever has engineered the recipe to maximize overrun. That's the volume of whipped air we talked about. Wall's Soft Scoop is famous for being easily scoopable straight from the freezer. Marketing tells you this is a structural miracle of convenience. The reality? You can scoop it easily because it is packed with air and held together by a four-way cocktail of stabilizers: gar gum, tara gum, locust bean gum, and carrageenan. According to independent laboratory testing logs on mass-market frozen desserts, products in this category frequently push right up to the maximum legal limit of 100% overrun. That means when you carry a 1.8-litre tub of Wall's home from Sainsbury's, you are carrying 900 millilitres of air. The actual dairy elements are reconstituted skimmed milk and whey solids, sweetened with a heavy dose of glucose syrup and fructose. Dr. Aris Spiropoulos, a prominent UK nutritional consultant, point out that high fructose and glucose syrups offer zero nutritional value beyond empty calories, spiking blood sugar far faster than traditional cane sugar. Wall's Soft Scoop is a masterclass in corporate efficiency. It's a tub of frozen, sweetened wind held together by seaweed extracts and seed gums. www.tesco.com Show2. Then there is Carte d'Or, another Unilever powerhouse. This brand positions itself as the continental, sophisticated choice. The tubs are golden. The flavors sound like they belong in a Parisian brasserie, and the price point reflects that supposed premium status. It's positioned as the restaurant-quality dessert you can serve to guests. But look at the ingredient deck on their classic vanilla or honeycomb varieties. You will find the exact same industrial toolkit: reconstituted skimmed milk, fructose syrup, glucose fructose syrup, and vegetable fats. The texture is engineered to be thick and smooth, but it achieves this via synthetic emulsifiers rather than rich dairy fat. You are paying twice the price of a standard store brand for essentially the same base ingredients, wrapped in a golden plastic tub and an elegant French name. It is the culinary equivalent of putting a designer badge on a budget hatchback and charging luxury saloon prices. And finally, we reach the absolute titan of the British summer, the crown jewel of the ice cream van and the supermarket multi-pack, the Wall's Cornetto. It is the ultimate nostalgic treat: the crunchy cone, the chocolate tip at the bottom, the smooth ice cream on top. We've all eaten dozens of them. But if you read the fine print on a pack of Classico Cornettos bought from Tesco or Co-op today, the reality is staggering. It does not say ice cream on the front of the multi-pack box. It says smooth vanilla flavor with a chocolate flavor coating. The product inside that paper sleeve is legally a frozen dessert anomaly. The ingredient list reveals that the second ingredient, right after reconstituted skimmed milk, is coconut fat, not cream. Coconut fat. It relies entirely on a complex blend of vegetable oils, glucose syrup, fructose, and a heavy stabilizing mixture of guar gum, tarragon, locust bean gum, and carrageenan to mimic the density of a dairy cone. To blend the vegetable fat with the water base, they use multiple emulsifiers, including ammonium phosphatides and mono and diglycerides of fatty acids. The iconic chocolate disc on top and the plug at the bottom? Legally, it's chocolate flavor coating, made with fat-reduced cocoa, powder and vegetable oils rather than genuine regulated chocolate. Unilever has systematically stripped the dairy fat out of an iconic British classic, replaced it with tropical plant oils and an army of industrial gums, whipped it full of air, and sold it back to you under the guise of an authentic Italian dairy tradition. It is a triumph of marketing over substance, selling you a hollowed-out chemical imitation of your own childhood memories. And now, what it was worth watching all the way through for. We have waded through the corporate misdirection, the legal definitions, and the tubs of frozen air. So let's talk about the good stuff. The real deal. The actual ice cream that rewards your taste buds instead of ripping off your wallet. These are the brands that earn their spot by refusing to replace dairy fat with laboratory scaffolding. Best of all, they are sitting right there in British supermarkets, waiting for you to make the switch. Let's kick off with the most mainstream, accessible option on the list: Mackey's of Scotland Luxury Traditional. You can find their massive 1-litre tubs in almost every major British shop: Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda and Morrison's. Mackey's is produced on a family-owned farm in Aberdeenshire, and their philosophy is beautifully straightforward. They use fresh, whole milk and real whipping cream produced by their own cows, powered by wind and solar energy generated right on the farm. Look at the ingredient deck on their traditional tub. Whole milk comprises 60% of the recipe, and whipping cream makes up another 19%. That is roughly 80% pure, unadulterated dairy right out of the gate. Because they use actual whipping cream, the sensory experience is a complete revelation compared to budget soft scoops. It is intensely creamy, velvety, and has a clean, milky finish that melts at exactly the rate real dairy should. The best part? It is incredibly reasonably priced. At around £3 to £4 for a whole litre, the cost works out to roughly 30 to 40 pence per generous serving. The downside? To keep it easily scoopable at a family budget, they do add a tiny touch of glycerine and a minimal amount of sodium alginate and guar gum. But compared to the 5-gum horrors we discussed earlier, Mackey's is an absolute triumph of value and transparency for a daily family treat. Next up is an organic icon you can easily grab at Tesco or Waitrose: Green and Black's Organic Vanilla. Known primarily for their chocolate, their foray into the freezer aisle is a masterclass in clean formulation. Their philosophy is rooted in certified organic sourcing, meaning the dairy comes from British pastures where cows graze without routine antibiotics or synthetic hormones. The ingredient profile is pristine: whole milk, double cream at 20%, cane sugar, egg yolks, skimmed milk powder, and real vanilla. In fact, they use both ground bourbon vanilla pods and bourbon vanilla extract. When you open a tub, you instantly spot the physical proof: hundreds of tiny, authentic black vanilla specks scattered through the cream. The texture is dense, heavy, and satisfyingly thick, coating your mouth in a genuine custard base that feels indulgent because it is indulgent. Egg yolks provide the natural lecithin needed for emulsification, leaving only a single stabilizer, gyar gum, to protect it during transit. At around £5 for a 500 milliliter tub, it works out to roughly £1 per serving. It is more expensive than mass-market options, but every penny of that markup goes toward double cream and real, hand-pollinated orchid vanilla rather than vegetable oils and whipped air, if you want the ultimate gold standard supermarket upgrade that you can buy absolutely anywhere from Sainsbury's to your local co-op corner shop. You turn to Häagen-Dazs. This is a brand that built its entire global reputation on a fanatical resistance to industrial gums. Look at their classic vanilla pint. It contains exactly 5 ingredients: fresh cream, condensed skimmed milk, sugar, water, and egg yolks, rounded off with natural vanilla extract. That is it. No gar gum, no xanthan gum, no carrageenan, no mono and diglycerides. They use egg yolks exclusively for natural emulsification. Because they don't use gums to hold artificial air in place, they operate at an incredibly low overrun of just 20 to 30%. Pick up a pint of Häagen-Dazs in one hand and a cheap store brand tub of the same size in the other. The weight difference is immediate and shocking. The Häagen-Dazs tub feels like a brick because it is packed tight with actual butterfat and dairy solids. When you eat it, it doesn't feel fluffy or foamy. It is dense, rich, and melts clean on the tongue without leaving a slimy film. It is undeniably a premium product, usually retailing around £5 to £5.50 a pint, which translates to about £1.20 per serving. The downside is clearly the price, and it is high in sugar and calories because it is genuine, dense custard. But if you want a verifiably pure product with zero chemical manipulation, this is the easiest, most accessible standard in the country. Finally, for the absolute pinnacle of artisanal quality available in the UK, look for small batch. Independent British dairy producers like Jude's or regional farm shops that pasteurize on-site. Jude's, based in Hampshire, is a certified B Corp, meaning they are legally held to strict environmental and social standards. They craft their ice cream using fresh, regional milk and double cream, keeping the ingredient deck short, transparent, and focused entirely on flavor purity. It is churned in small batches with low air content, resulting in a dense, hand-packed quality that feels like it came from an authentic Italian gelateria rather than an industrial estate. It sits at the premium end of the price scale, but it represents the absolute ideal of what ice cream was meant to be before corporations realized they could sell you whipped wind instead. Whether you are on a tight budget looking for a genuine dairy upgrade or want a pure luxury treat, these options prove you do not have to settle for engineered foam. So, how do you protect yourself from paying premium prices for whipped corporate wind the next time you browse the freezer aisle at Tesco, Sainsbury's, or Waitrose? You don't need a degree in food chemistry. You just need to follow these 5 straightforward, bulletproof rules to spot real ice cream in seconds. Rule 1. Check the actual legal name on the tub, usually hidden on the back or in tiny print near the weight. If it strictly says dairy ice cream, the fat content must legally consist exclusively of milk fat, with 0 cheap vegetable alternatives like palm or coconut oil. If it just says ice cream or frozen dessert, They have legally bypassed that purity standard to throw in cheaper plant fats. Rule 2. Check the first 3 ingredients. Real, honest ice cream will always list whole milk, cream or double cream right at the top of the deck. If water, reconstituted milk powder, or glucose syrup appear before the actual cream, the manufacturer has formulated the recipe to cut costs, using industrial sugars to inflate the bulk. Rule 3. Perform the supermarket weight check. Pick up a pint of luxury ice cream in one hand and a cheap mass-market budget tub of the exact same size in the other. The heavier container is dense because it is packed with actual dairy solids, while the Featherlight carton is filled with up to 100% whipped air that costs the company nothing but costs you full price at the till. Rule 4. Count the stabilizers and emulsifiers. While a single stabilizer like Gargum is common to keep the product smooth during transit, a long cocktail of 5 different gums combined with mono and diglycerides of fatty acids is the telltale sign of a low-fat, high-air imitation that requires a chemical skeleton to stop it from collapsing. Rule 5. Execute the home melt test. Leave a single scoop on a plate at room temperature for 15 to 20 minutes. Real dairy ice cream will melt clean into a smooth, liquid puddle of cream, whereas a heavily engineered, over-stabilized frozen dessert will simply slump, holding a foamy, spongy or slightly slimy shape long after it has warmed up. Ultimately, the mass-market ice cream industry is built on a very simple economic calculation. How much expensive dairy can we strip out and replace with cheap water, tropical plant oils, laboratory gums, and air before the British public notices? They rely on your nostalgia, your busy routines, and the trusted, century-old brand names on the front of the packaging to shield you from the uncomfortable truth printed in the tiny ingredients list on the back. But once you shift your thinking and realize that you buy by weight and substance rather than just the size of the plastic tub, you instantly stop being a victim of corporate marketing.